Hello and welcome to the Wheels Boy channel, where we cover Chinese cars, everything from tiny electric sports cars all the way up to things like this, the new Denza N8L. This large family SUV is very similar to the Denza N9 that we reviewed earlier this year, but there are some very interesting differences that we will get to. However, I first want to talk about the fact that this test drive, unlike the last one we did for the N9, allows us to try out the latest version of their driver assistance system. So let's talk about that.
That driver assistance system uses an NVIDIA Orin X chip with 254 TOPS to command a suite of cameras, radar, and a single LiDAR unit. It promises both highway and city NOA, meaning the car will follow the navigation without your input. We started out on the highway, where the system was rock steady, if a bit hesitant to overtake when given the opportunity.
Our experience of the vehicle's city NOA is limited to here in the small city of Huizhou, not a metropolis like Guangzhou that we were in this morning, but I have to say it is a very complex road situation with narrow roads, lots of foot traffic, lots of scooters, and lots of cars, and some infrastructure that isn't quite as clear as that of larger cities. And considering the fact that this is only a small experience or limited experience, I'm actually pretty impressed by how this car was able to navigate these circumstances. Yes, it did take a little while to figure out how to get past some intersections, but didn't really feel that nervous. It just felt like it was figuring things out, or rather being careful, which I always appreciate in a system. I would need a much longer experience of the car across multiple days and multiple environments to offer a final conclusion, but I will say this initial impression is pretty darn good. Getting back to the, let's call it, manual driving experience of this car, the powertrain is remarkably similar to that of the larger N9. That means a plug-in hybrid with a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, the exact same turbocharged 4-cylinder up front, and 3 electric motors as part of the E3 powertrain system. The front motor is also the exact same as the N9. However, this car does have 120 kilowatts or nearly 200 horsepower less than the N9. That is because its rear motors are not the same ones as the N9. They are less powerful. Having said that, 762 horsepower, or about 560 kilowatts, is plenty for a family SUV, and that is the standard powertrain. There is no smaller or less powerful powertrain available. It's good enough for a 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time of 3.9 seconds. Just some added context for you. That is more than twice the power of an entry-level V6 Range Rover, and that 0 to 100 km per hour time is almost half that of the Range Rover, which is 6.2 seconds. Despite that fact, this car costs around a quarter of the Range Rover here in the Chinese market.
Denza's E3 powertrain not only includes 3 electric motors, it also includes rear steer, and it's the combination of these two systems that allows the N8L, which is longer than a BMW X7, to have a turning radius that's smaller than a Mini Cooper. Those 3 motors also allow it to complete compass turns, where it locks one of its front wheels and pirouettes around it.
The N8L has the class standard double wishbone front suspension and 5-link rear with adjustable height and stiffness air suspension. It also has a system that uses that front-facing camera at the top of the windshield to read the road surfaces ahead of you and adjust the suspension in response. This differs, for example, from the system used in the ES8 that we recently reviewed from NIO. That car bases its adjustments to the suspension on cloud data that's been gathered by other cars, whereas this is an instantaneous response to the circumstances ahead. We've now entered some mountain roads, not exactly this car's natural environment considering its size and role as a family SUV, but a good opportunity to see how it actually handles when you push it a little bit. Needless to say, power, not an issue, even on this steep climb. When it comes to the body control, it's quite good. They emphasize that quite a bit during the presentation for this vehicle, and you can feel it here in the mountain roads. It is much firmer, much more controlled than something like the more affordable Anvo L90. I also think it's probably a bit better than the Ito M8, though I must admit that my experience of the M8 was limited to city driving. I didn't get a chance to hustle it through mountain roads like this. The steering, of course, is incredibly light, regardless of which driving mode you have it in. I currently have it in sport mode, which firms it up a little bit, but this is still a big old family SUV, and it feels every bit the 5.2 meters in length that you would expect when going along these narrow roads. It also, in particular, feels the 2 meters wide. This thing takes up every inch of the lane, but thanks to the decent body control, I do feel like I can point it reasonably accurately within that lane.
After some consumers claimed that the N9 was overpriced, Denza was very aggressive with the pricing of the N8L, setting it at $42,000 to $47,000 US, and thereby undercutting a number of competitors.
The exterior styling updates to the N8L are small but significant, and they focus on the DRLs right here. You see, in the N9, it was a large headlight unit up here with a DRL slit underneath. Now, they've moved the headlight unit to this vertical position here. The result is something that looks slimmer, more modern, and definitely less traditional SUV than the N9. That front end also makes it appear slightly less domineering than the larger N9 SUV, as does its overall size, which is slightly smaller in every dimension than that flagship SUV from Denza. Still, it has a rather significant 3,075mm wheelbase. But I must mention, that's slightly shorter than that of an Ito M8. When it comes to the appearance of this car compared to the M8, well, I think it looks a little bit more, how should I put this, square. A little bit more in your face than the very rounded Ito. Big fans of the N9's styling will be happy to learn that they've pretty much left the rear end untouched. That means it still has what I refer to as the power beak here in the back. For better or worse. Mostly for worse, in my opinion, because this thing, while identifiable, isn't exactly beautiful. A really quick note for those of you who are super Chinese car nerds like myself. Why is this thing called the N8L instead of just the N8? After all, wouldn't N8 make more sense because the larger one's the N9? It would, but they needed to differentiate it from the first generation N8. Never heard of it? Well, most people haven't, because it was only sold for one model year back in 2023. That car, just like the previous generation, the Denza X, which we reviewed a few years ago, is based on the BYD Tang, versus this car, which is based on a totally different platform. I only ever saw the N8 one time at a BYD Tech Day back at the very beginning of 2024, and after that, I never saw one again. Not at a BYD event, and definitely not on the road. I would guess if they ever actually sold to the public, they probably sold very few of them. Who knows? Might become a collector's item. Between that power beak and the third row is a rear storage area that I actually don't have official numbers for. I do know that underneath the floor here, there's a 51-liter storage area, but I don't know exactly how many liters they claim are behind this third row. It seems to be roughly the equivalent of what you would find in a Envo L90, but maybe a little bit smaller than an Ito M8. We'll have to wait until the official numbers come out to know for sure. It certainly seems large enough for carrying some luggage, but you're not going to fit 6 people's luggage behind this. However, you can, at the touch of a button, lay down the third row seats to make them completely flat, and then you can fit plenty of stuff. As with the N9, the N8L has available electrically closing and opening doors. You can do that via the brake pedal like I just did, or via the button here on the overhead. In terms of features, yeah, it's really hard to tell this apart from the more expensive N9. Let's go through the screens starting from left to right. In front of me is a 50-inch heads-up display with augmented reality functions for your navigation. Below that, you have a 13.2-inch digital instrument cluster, then the 17.3-inch center screen. Now, that center screen uses BYD's UI, or the Denza UI. They're honestly not that different, the logic especially. And I have to say, the BYD self-developed chip that they use, it's not the fastest in terms of response times. It definitely doesn't keep up with something that's got a 8295 processor from Qualcomm, or the chips that are used by Huawei for their Harmony OS in those Ito vehicles that I've been talking about. It's not tip-top, but is reasonably useful in terms of logic. To the right of that, you got a 13.2-inch passenger screen, that's for entertainment, for putting in navigation destinations, so on and so forth. And the final screen, that's right there. It has a digital rear view mirror that, at the press of a button, you can just turn into a regular rear view mirror.
Those electric doors can also be opened in a rather less traditional way, a simple thumbs-up gesture. This is accomplished via gesture recognition software and the exterior camera.
The overall styling of this interior, again, just like the N9, it falls into that category of kind of a modern car with lots of screen, but designed to appeal to an older audience, a more traditional luxury car buyer. This is the same thing that was done with the Ito M8 and M9, and it's been very successful. I will say I think it's a little bit more visually interesting than the Ito M8 and M9, which are just one big gigantic set of screens. Material quality, it's not up to the same level as the much more expensive N9. For example, these seats are not real leather. They are a faux leather. They're very soft, and having spent multiple hours behind the wheel, I can tell you that they are very comfortable as well as being heated and ventilated and massaging. So I can't really complain from a functionality standpoint, but in terms of what luxury car buyers want from a car, I think a lot of them want real leather seats. So it'll be interesting to see whether consumers are okay with that thing. This car has not one, but two refrigerators, because in addition to the one that is on the back of the center console for second row and third row passengers, there's also one here for, oh my, look at this. It's a copy of Driving the Dragon, The Extraordinary Rise of the Chinese Car Industry, written by friend of the show, Mark Andrews, former host of Wheelsboy, who's since returned to the UK. This is one of my favorite books of the year. I don't know how it ended up in the refrigerator, but if I were you, I would rush out and buy a copy of your own, especially if you're interested in learning about the development, the extraordinary rise, if you will, of the Chinese car industry from someone who saw it firsthand. Normally when I review cars in this class, large luxury SUVs here in China, I insist on sitting in the right-hand seat because that's where the zero-gravity seat is. This car, however, has no zero-gravity seats in the second row, only in the front row, which I can't really understand because it seems like every single competitor has at least one of them and they've got none. Still, the rear seats are quite comfortable, and that seat over there does have a leg rest that you can adjust, so it's not exactly an uncomfortable place to spend time, especially when you open up the 17.3-inch rear screen. Once this is open, you can hit a button right there, pop a drink into your cup holder, and enjoy a movie or TV show or any kind of video with the 17.3-inch screen and the 20-speaker DVLA sound system for this car. Like many of its competitors, the N8L has a dedicated children's area here on the rear screen, a children's mode, so to speak, where it's got content tailored specifically for children. Again, other cars have that, but I want to talk about another child-specific feature that other cars don't have. This car's voice command system can recognize when a child is speaking to it as opposed to an adult. That matters because when it recognizes that it's a child, it will lock out certain functions of the voice command system. For example, it won't allow you to open or close the windows via voice command, which an adult would be able to do. That is much better for safety. But I'm not done because this system has integrated DeepSeek AI. And when it recognizes that it's talking to a child, the AI would tailor its answers for a child audience. For example, if your kid is in the back seat and it starts asking questions like, why are plants green? Well, the AI will create its own visualizations and it will create written responses that are better for a child or more easy for a child to understand. Simple answers, basically. Whereas if you're an adult and you ask it a question, it'll give you a much more, let's say, professional answer. The difference in space between the N8L and the N9 isn't really felt in the second row so much as in the third row. You still have, as you can see, some leg room with that seat adjusted for plenty of space, but it's not quite as copious as it is in the larger N9. Still, the third row is a pretty comfortable place, decent amounts of headroom, as you can see. It's got adjustable rake and forward and aft. Each side also has a USB Type-C charging port and heated seats. That's going to do it for today's review of the Denza N8L. If you'd like to learn more about the Denza brand, be sure to check out our reviews of other Denza models such as the N7, the N9, the Z9, and the Z9 GT. Also, check us out on social media. Links in the description below. And as always, like, subscribe, and hit the bell.